Hi, this is Peter Woolfolk. With 2022 behind us, let me say thank you so very, very much. First, to all of our great guests that provide the exceptional content for this podcast, and to our ever-growing number of listeners and supporters of the Public Relations Review podcast. At the close of 2022, we now have listeners in over 2,000 cities located in 123 countries around the world. Here in the U.S., this podcast has been voted one of the best PR podcasts in America. Because we continue to provide skilled professionals that can present you with excellent content on a wide range of PR topics and the large listener downloads of usable information we deliver, this podcast was awarded a Best PR Podcast trophy from the Nashville chapter of the Public Relations Society of America. We have also won a Best Business Podcast trophy from the American Business Association. I will continue to seek some of the best professionals from all across America and a few from foreign nations to bring you the kind of professional information that is useful to your business and to expand your knowledge about public relations. These professionals are delighted to share this information with you, and it appears from our continued growth that you enjoy listening to them. So once again, thank you so very much for being a listener. Please let your friends and colleagues know about the Public Relations Review podcast. We are available on Amazon, Apple, Audible, Spotify, Google, iHeart, and another 30 or more sites, making us available worldwide. So thank you. And now on to the podcast.
Welcome. This is the Public Relations Review podcast, a program to discuss the many facets of public relations with seasoned professionals, educators, authors, and others. Now, here is your host, Peter Woolfolk.
Welcome to the Public Relations Review podcast and to our listeners all across America and around the world. Now, we keep growing. Just a quick note, we now have listeners in 125 countries that covers 2,052 cities around the world. Now, I'm pleased to announce another first for this podcast. This episode will be our very first podcast with public relations professionals from Puerto Rico. This began in January of 2023 when I sent out a message of a PRSA's open forum, making note of the fact that my podcast was among the top 25 of all their podcasts. And then Spotify also notified me that this podcast was among the top 30% of all its podcasts. As a result, I received multiple notes of congratulations. One of those sending the notes is one of my guests today. So let me now welcome Gladys Diaz of GMD PR Consultant, the Note Sender, and Tony Darday, President of Puerto Rico Association of Public Relations. Thank you both for joining me today.
Thank you for inviting us.
It's a pleasure.
Well, let's first then talk about, are there differences between how PR is done in Puerto Rico and in the United States? And if so, what is that difference?
Well, thank you, Peter. In some ways, we are very similar because we are associated with the Public Relations Society of America, and we have 25 APRs in Puerto Rico, and we are proud of having 25 APRs in Puerto Rico and to be promoting actively the education and understanding of the process to have a greater number of colleagues with this credential that is so prestigious around the world. So we have the academic context is very similar than in the U.S. The relationship with the colleagues in the same way that the RSA force is with the colleagues is, replicated in Puerto Rico. The education and the content and the topics are very similar, but in some ways, we are different because of our culture, because of our political and social context, and because of the opportunities we still have ahead to elevate the education and the strategic role of the profession, I believe that we still have room to grow in that area, but we're not in a bad place now. It's just that we, as public relations practitioners with more than 30 years that we are both, Tony and myself, we feel that we need to promote greater and better understanding of our role as practitioners and the importance of our profession in a democratic and open political and economical system. Tommy, I don't know if you want to share your perspective on that.
Yeah, I mean, I've always thought that one of the biggest differences in the practice of public relations in Puerto Rico versus in the U.S. is that just given our size, we're such a smaller territory. The public relations practitioner in Puerto Rico needs to be, in a way, a little bit jack of all trades. We need to understand how to work all sorts of public relations tactics. I worked for many years for a multinational communications agency here in Puerto Rico, and I would participate in programs with my colleagues from PR firms in the U.S., and I would see how so many divisions were created, so many specialties. You had a public relations practitioner that just does public affairs or just does technology or just does investment PR. Here in Puerto Rico, you really need to do everything.
Okay.
Because the market is not big enough, to develop a PR firm that just specializes in one particular topic. So in that sense, it's a great opportunity, because you have a client who requires tourism public relations, and then at the same time, you have a client that requires technology communications, and you learn how to do many, many things. And I think that's a really great to develop your skills in many areas. And it also helps that it does. The job is never boring.
But it's good because we're supposed to be a generalist, not a specialist.
Mm-hmm.
We're supposed to be focused on one area, one turf. We are trusted counselors, but we are also in charge of media relations, communications, external communication, planning, and so on, crisis management, reputation management, issues management, special events. So we dominate everything, and we are very rounded professionals. So on that aspect, we are well experienced and seasoned in our industry.
Yeah.
And that's good.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it comes to my attention now, since you said that you have to gain some experience in all of those, or a lot of those particular areas. How do you go about getting it? In other words, crisis communications is crisis communications, regardless perhaps what the subject is, but going from technology, for instance, to climate control. How do you get that managed climate control when perhaps you've not been exposed to it before? How do you begin to get that skill so that you can apply it to whatever the client's needs are?
Think about shock and exposure. You have to just jump into it.
Okay.
We had it with all yours and Maria in 2017. Don't go too far.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. I mean, that's a funny question because you never think about it, I had never had a client in agriculture. And I got that client several years ago when I didn't know anything about agriculture in any aspect. And you just learned. I mean, there's no fear. There's no shame in that. You just dive into it and start learning. And this statement will probably shock some specialists in the States, but, I met many, many people that just did marketing communications PR or just did investment relations PR or just did crisis management PR. And many people, I know agencies that just do tourism PR.
Specialized areas.
Yeah, that's very common in the States.
Mm-hmm.
And probably in other parts of the world, I'm not sure, but for us, it's not common because, we're a small island and, just project-wise and population-wise, there isn't really a chance to just specialize in one field. You just specialize in one field, you won't have a lot of work.
Right. I understand. That makes a lot. You have to adjust to the circumstances, I guess is the best way to put that.
Yeah, exactly. And that's coming from Tony is the owner of a mid-sized public relations agency from
Since 2006.
since 2006.
When I started the.
And I have been a consultant for the past 23 years. And I'm a solo practitioner. I hire resources as long as I need them, but I am a solo practitioner. Before that, I used to work for local and international public relations agencies. So that's coming from two practitioners in different areas that are telling you that we need to know about all the industries and all the type of work and specializations.
Before I started my agency in 2006, I had been working with, I was leading the office of GCI. GCI was a public relations firm that was part of Gray Communications. Gray was later acquired by the WPP Group. So it was a multinational firm that had offices all over the world. And even then, in working under GCI, I was working all sorts of categories, all sorts of products, all sorts of issues. We really never specialized in just one thing. I think you start building a reputation for certain things, and then more of those clients come, but you can't just work on that. You have to work on many specialties.
I agree. It makes sense to me. Believe me, I've done a lot of things too and learned a lot of things from having to do do work in different categories. So I can certainly understand. Well, one of the things when Gladys and I talked the very first time, she mentioned to me that I thought was very, very unusual, and that was the fact that you have to have a license to practice public relations in Puerto Rico. So tell us why that came about.
That was in 2008. It's the license number 204, and that came about. I think the industry was worried that we were getting all sorts of practitioners saying that they practice public relations and putting the profession at risk in a way. People who probably had not had any experience in doing serious PR, the people probably didn't have the education, and then some people that we felt were probably not practicing in the most ethical manner. And I think ethics was probably the driving force behind a group of people getting together and fighting to get that law approved, because we were concerned about the seriousness of the profession. We wanted it to grow in a way that, with credibility and with effectiveness and with certain guidelines. I know this is a subject that can be argued back and forth, and we know that it's discussed in many ways. But we were able to get it approved, and to get it approved at the beginning, this type of thing, as it occurs in many situations, you have to grandfather. You have to do a grandfather clause and let everybody in, and then with time, the true practitioners stay, and the true practitioners come in.
Mm-hmm.
Because to maintain your license, you have to maintain credits. We require 30 credits over the course of 3 or 4 years.
Yeah, continuous education.
Continuous education.
Mm-hmm.
And so that ensures that, number one, in order to practice, you have to have a license. In order to say that you're a public relations practitioner, you have to have a license. It ensures that you're studying all the time and searching for knowledge and information to keep yourself relevant and
Working in the field.
You have to be working in the field, and it kind of, tries to turn away the rotten apples. The people that are here doing propaganda or that are doing, malicious communications and, bribing people,
Pseudo-PR.
doing things that we don't want to be associated with the profession.
Mm-hmm.
And then at the association, which is separate, in fact, as part of this law, there was a board called the Public Relations Licensing Board that is adjunct to the Department of State. And that's a separate board of people that are nominated by the governor, and they are the ones who go through the process of reviewing these licenses, the whole system to do it, and to defend the license, and to
renew the license,
to renew it, and to oversee the process. And then separate to that, there's the Public Relations Association, which is the association that I am presiding now. And part of our continuous work is to denounce and clarify and educate regarding the public relations practice.
Mm-hmm.
If there's any public issue that is being discussed in the media and people are saying that so-and-so is doing public relations, then we know that that's not public relations. We stand up and we issue statements and we talk to people, we talk to the media, and, all with the objective of creating more education and clarifying the difference between, for example, between propaganda and public relations.
Mm-hmm.
Which is going back to the genesis. The law was approved in 2008, but it was as a result of 2 or 3 years of hard work that began at the heart of the Puerto Rico Public Relations Association. And it was not an easy process. It was very, very hard to get consensus, but we did, and we finally have a law and we have a regulation, which is not perfect, that we can improve for sure. And we are working at it with the board designated by the government, but we do have something to protect our profession.
Mm-hmm.
It's not perfect, we know that, but we have something that at least we can call that are guidelines to obtain and to maintain your license to practice public relations in Puerto Rico.
Yeah. In the universe, there have been 1,300 licenses that have been issued. In total right now, active, that are, bona fide licenses, we have 1,000 people approximately that maintain their license. So that's basically the universe of our official public relations practitioners based on that number. That doesn't mean that there's some undercover PR agency. Without a license, we know that happens. So, but that's more or less the number. 1,000.
Okay. Now let me ask you: do you have PR curriculum in your universities there as well?
Yeah.
Sure.
Okay.
And the association is very active with promoting the education among students, among university students. Actually, this week, Tommy was visiting one of the local universities Public Relations Association that was having an event, and the association is very active, not only engaging the students into promoting their development and their entrance to the professional arena, but also into motivating them to become active members of the association, to get in touch with potential
employers,
Mm-hmm.
colleagues, mentors, to be part of the association, because it's the only entity that promotes our development, our growth, our education. So the association is very important in Puerto Rico.
Yeah, we have several education providers that are licensed by the board, by the Public Relations Regulatory Board, to offer continued education programs. The Public Relations Association is one of them. And there's some other universities that also have this license to offer a continued education programs and for credit. So within the association, we have different committees, and we always have a director in charge of education. And that director is always producing content or panels or, just educational forums and events so that you can participate in those events and acquire credits. Then we in parallel have a director that's just in charge of students and academia. And that director this year has done an excellent job reconnecting with the 6 universities in Puerto Rico that offer some kind of programs in public relations. Some of them offer minors. Some of them offer a bachelor degree, full bachelor degree. Some of them offer a master's degree, etc. So that director is in charge of maintaining those relationships, maintaining communication, knowing who the students are, and inviting them to events.
And I have an anecdote, Peter, to share with you and your listeners. And it is that Fernando Valverde, APR and fellow PRSA, who is one of the pioneers in public relations in Puerto Rico, he passed away a few years ago. He invited Edward Bernays 2 times to come to Puerto Rico, and he came to the University of Sacred Heart and did presentations to students and to the Puerto Rico Public Relations Association back in the 1900s, maybe 1930 something, 1940. I don't know. I don't have the exact date, but it's a fact that he came, and we have pictures of it to visit to Puerto Rico because he was a personal friend of Fernando Valverde. And we treasure that as part of our history and development in Puerto Rico of the professors.
Well, let me ask you something else then. Now, do you have, as a group, I'm sure that there are opportunities for you to cooperate or do work for U.S. companies in Puerto Rico? Does that happen that they needed to reach out and say, we need to have certain things done down there in Puerto Rico, so we need to have an agency down there?
That happens. I have been hired by PR firms from Florida, from PR firms from New York. There's a network of an international network of independent PR firms that I'm also part of. And from time to time, if they don't have an office in Puerto Rico, they do engage with offices here, with firms, local firms. Because PR is so local. I believe that it's very hard to practice PR from a distance.
Right.
Remotely. If you don't have somebody touch base with locally that can fill you in on the nuances of different issues and people and help you do the research, it's very hard. You can't really just drop into a different country and do a public relations program.
Right.
It's possible, but I
very
think
hard.
It's more effective if you've hired somebody local.
It's very hard because you have to understand the culture. You have to understand what you have to understand the cosmovision of that set of people and publics that you're geared to or focused into. I can tell you that when I was working before becoming a consultant, I was working with a local communications agency. I developed their PR department, and I worked not only in Puerto Rico, but in the Caribbean region and Latin American region. And I had clients like Royal Caribbean, Celebrity Cruises, Citibank. For Citibank, I launched Citibank Advantage Visa card in 8 markets outside Puerto Rico. And that exposure allowed me to make a presentation to Manny Salves and me, MSNL, and we formalized an affiliation agreement in Puerto Rico with MSNL, which is something huge for a local agency to achieve. And MSNL is highly prestigious, so it was such an accomplishment I am proud of. And I believe that I resigned the agency, and that agency has been my client for the past 23 years, and I believe that as the affiliation agreement.
Mm-hmm.
So, as Tony was saying, you build a reputation, and these companies understand and recognize your work and your trajectory.
Mm-hmm.
And you have case studies and work that speaks highly about what you do in your profession, and that allows you to have opportunities that come to you.
Well, that's outstanding, and you guys have provided an awful lot of information about public relations in Puerto Rico. Is there anything that has been left out that you think that we need to cover?
Mira, I'd like to cover one thing. If we have any young people listening to this podcast, I'd like to leave them with an idea of the things that I personally really enjoy about this profession. If you're listening to this podcast and you've seen Hamilton, the musical, in the second act, there's a song that's called The Room Where It Happens. And I think that is one of the most parallel things that you enjoy in this profession, because in this profession, you are constantly in the room where it happens. You're dealing with issues before anybody else knows about, and you have the opportunity to express your opinion to leadership and to management regarding the course of action. So, if you want to be in the room where it happens, you have to work in public relations. The other thing that I always tell young people is, and I don't want them to take this the wrong way, but there is a certain element, an important element of power. When you work in this profession, you can develop a reputation. You can create somebody of nothing. And you have the power to issue news and to have that news being broadcast through all sorts of media. You won't do this overnight. You won't do this from one day to the other, but if you stick to it and you develop your skills, you will have the power to make news. You will have the power to make someone famous. And that's addicting in a way, and it's a lot of fun. And it's very rewarding to see your press release, on the front page of a magazine or whatever, and say that I had something to do with that. And then thirdly is that you become an agent of change. You have that, you develop the skills to develop changes within an organization, inside it and outside it, how people perceive you. And in a way, you become the conscience of a corporation. You're the one that's supposed to stand up and say, no, we need to divulge this information. And doesn't mean we need to confess ourselves, but we need to make the public aware of what's going on. If it's a crisis, if it's an issue. And so, it's very connecting with your ethics and with your values, the way of expressing that to the world in the way that you work. And those are some of the things that I always tell young people, if they're considering a profession in public relations, to think about these things.
From my side, Peter, yesterday I was actually at the university giving a conference, and I always begin my dialogue because I learn from students and they learn from myself. It's a two-way process. I always depart from the public relations definition, and it's a management function that establishes and maintains mutually beneficial relationships between the company or product or service and the public from whom its failure or success depends. So we are not spinners, we are not agents of propaganda, we are not press agents. Those are tactics. We are ethical practitioners. We have a higher purpose to achieve understanding, to achieve mutual adjustment, to achieve social harmony. And that's why I love my profession, because as Tony was saying, we are agents of change, but we are responsible. We have to be accurate, adhere to the truth, and our ethics is non-negotiable. That's why we are the conscience of the company. I agree with Tommy. We have to say when it's no, that's wrong. We need to advocate for consumers, for public, for stakeholders, and we need to call it as it is. And it's fascinating to do our job when clients or employers allow us to do our job and receive our advice with appreciation.
Well, let me say this. I think is very inspiring and right on the money. That to really talk about what public relations does, how it can benefit corporations, and also benefit the people who actually practice it. So let me say again very much to thank you for Gladys Diaz and Tommy Darday for being our guest today. I've certainly learned a lot, and I'm sure our listeners will appreciate what they have heard. So for my listeners, if you've enjoyed it, we'd certainly like to get a great review from you. And please share this with your friends, and we'll look for you on the next edition of the Public Relations Review podcast.
This podcast is produced by Communication Strategies, an award-winning public relations and public affairs firm headquartered in Nashville, Tennessee. Thank you for joining us.
Hi, this is Peter Woolfolk speaking. Now, first of all, thank you so very much for listening to the podcast. Now, I am very excited to let you know that the podcast is now available on Amazon Alexa. You know the drill. Simply say, Alexa, play Public Relations Review podcast, and she'll take it from there. And again, thank you for listening. And if you enjoy the program, please become a subscriber. Now, on to the podcast.